The risk didn't change, only the behavior of the skipper, and unfortunately it cost him his life. Stay tuned to find out what you can do to prevent this from happening to you and your team. This is Schaefer from the Ministry of Sailing. Now it's time for the next episode of the Sailor's Debrief.
Get ready for a massive roll-up. Think about a candy bar. Right there. Let's go. Right there.
Today we're going to do the Sailor's Debrief on the U.S. Sailing's inquiry on the death of the skipper of the Morgan of Marietta. The Morgan of Marietta was 42 foot long, a Vaquier Centurion, and the skipper, 74 years old, had already completed 10 Newport to Bermuda races. She had an 8-person crew. 2 of them were new. 6 of them were experienced already on the Morgan of Marietta. They were broken down into 2 watches of 4 people each. The crew's expected winds in the 20 to 25 knot range between the start of the race on Friday all the way to the incident. On the 3rd day of the race at 11 o'clock, the skipper comes on to assume his watch. The winds were between 290 and 330 true. They were heading at about 160 to 190 degrees. By 12 o'clock noon, the wind was between the low to mid 20s. Waves were between 12 and 18 feet. Water temperature was approximately 73 degrees. Boat was doing between 8 to 10 knots, and they were heeled about 15 degrees. If we take a look at the historical weather data on that day, we can see some of the waves were reaching 17 feet in height. At 12:15, Colin was sitting on the starboard side of the cockpit, way forward, right next to the companion hatch. There were 3 other crew members. They were all strapped in. They had their PFDs on. Some of them had double tethers. Most unfortunately, however, Colin didn't have his PFD on, nor did he have his tethers. The risk had not changed. The only thing that changed was the behavior, unfortunately, by the skipper. Every team in the world, even the world's best teams, often fall under the curse of risk habituation, where the risk doesn't change, but the behavior does. You know, a constant security briefing, one that goes on throughout every tack, every jibe, needs to be reminded to the entire crew that the risks haven't changed, so we need to maintain the safety at our utmost respect. I am sure, in the position that he was, next to the bulkhead, next to the companionway, wedged in between 2 other individuals, he felt safe at the time. But the risk, unfortunately, did not change. At 12:25, approximately an 18-foot wave slams into the Morgan of Marietta and launches Colin over the leeward rail and into the water. According to the boat data from Expedition, the heel angle of the vessel reached 50 degrees when the wave hit it. The team practiced many times before. The spotter maintained contact. They hit the MOB button on the helm to mark the exact location that the skipper went overboard. They readied the life sling, and they performed a quick stop. Within 2 minutes, the off-watch had their life vests on. The engine was started, the jib was dropped, and they started throwing cushions overboard to leave a trail back to where the man overboard was in the water. Within 5 minutes, the skipper was in the life sling. They were never more than 300 yards away from the person in the water. They did a superb job, just as they practiced in all their man overboard drills. Due to the larger nature of the skipper, the crew was unable to hoist him on deck. They tried using a jib halyard, but in the shiv, there was chafing because it was going beyond the mast towards the back of the cockpit. The skipper passed away as he was in the water, connected to the life sling, because the crew was unable to get an incapacitated person, a person who could not help themselves, onto the deck of the vessel. While sailing in the oceans, there are many things that can be unexpected that can hurt you. There are many things that might be uncontrolled. But according to the U.S. Sailing Inquiry, we'll find that this could have been prevented. Now let's take a look at some of the lessons learned. Even with an impeccable quick stop, hitting the MOB button, dropping the jib, starting the engine, leaving a trail back to the person in the water, the number one lesson learned here is without a PFD, without being clipped in, this would have been 100% preventable. We can see in this photo here that Colin had his PFD on at the beginning of the race. We talked about risk habituation earlier. Sometimes the risk don't change, but sometimes the behavior does. So we can tell that he understood the risks and he was working very well with his team at the start of the race. Hazards that are frequently encountered over time sometimes become normalized. When those risks become normalized, that's when risk habituation occurs. That's where mistakes can often happen. Before we go any further, let's just talk a little bit about the skipper and give him the respect that he deserves. The family opened up the inquiry to U.S. Sailing. The crew participated. Not everybody does that. And we can all learn lessons from the inquiry. The skipper was part of the Perth Amboy Yacht Club, the Hong Kong Royal Yacht Club, and he was also a member of the Tri-Sail Storm Club. As a matter of fact, in lieu of sending flowers, they've asked for people to make donations to the Safety at Sea for the Tri-Sail Storm Club. The crew was using the Iridium Go as their satellite communication, which is required in the sailing instructions for the Newport to Bermuda race. One of the issues they ran into is only the skipper's phone was connected to the device. The crew also had difficulty because they weren't properly trained on the DSC features of the radio. Additionally, the radio was set to the low function of the VHF instead of the high function to increase its range in communicating. Another lessons learned we can all take home is some of the nearby boats didn't have the volume on their VHF radio turned up all the way, so they never heard the calls for help, the maydays that were being sent out by the crew of the Morgan and Marietta. They also didn't even activate the Mom 8, which might have been helpful in recovering the skipper out of the water. The Mom 8 was on board, it just wasn't utilized. You know you have success on a culture of safety when the lowest person on the totem pole, so to speak, always has the ability to speak up if they hear something, if they see something, or they see things which are not in line with the team's rules and regulations, their policies, and the things that are important to keep the crew safe. Do not send another person off of a sailboat to try to recover another person in the water without a certified rescue swimmer, a crew which is trained in how to deal with it, and the proper personal protection equipment. As you can see from this graphic provided by the U.S. Coast Guard, their ability to fly UH-60 is limited to 345 miles offshore. And a tip that the pros use is it'll be important to draw this line on your map, because what's going to happen when you draw this line on your map is your safety briefing is going to change. It's going to remind people, and this is an opportunity for you to fight the risk habituation, which happens on every team.
The rules of racing require every team to practice a man overboard drill. It's important to realize a man overboard drill has 3 phases. The first one is a vessel maneuverability. The second phase is to attach a person to the line. And finally, the last phase of an MOB drill is retrieving a person onto the vessel.
I would like to thank the Cruising Club of America, the Storm Tri-Sail Club, and the Newport Bermuda Race for providing the materials to give you this Sailor's Debrief. Please subscribe, please like, and please ring the bell so you're reminded when the Sailor's Debrief comes to you next. Thank you. Have a great day. Sail safe. Have fun.